Alright, what's up guys, it's Kostef here, and today we're going to be traveling back in time from my last video, so we're back in Australia. I'm going to be talking about something that I hope you guys won't judge me too much about, but it's going to be another story about a time where I just narrowly escaped a shit ton of trouble. And what do I mean by a shit ton of trouble? I mean like deported out of Australia shit ton of trouble. Now I'm hoping you guys won't judge me too much for this story, because I do feel like a lot of the events I'm about to describe really resulted from me being kind of like an outsider, being an American in Australia, and naturally becoming friends with other outsiders, being Koreans, Chinese, and Japanese kids that were in Australia for the education. Now, if you guys don't know, that is as close to a Western education as you can get without sending your kids to, Europe, America, or South America, because our educational systems are really different, like phenomenally different. The entire structure is just absolutely at its core different. So what a lot of Asian people do in Korea and Japan and China that want their kids to get a Western education is they send them to Australia, usually being chaperoned by an older brother or an uncle or just the mother, and then the father will stay in whatever country, which really led to a large amount of Asian children in Australia with not a lot of parental figures and not a lot of authority figures around them. And they developed their own little subcultures in the city and in the schools that the schools almost respect the hierarchy that comes along with it. Because Australia is a true melting pot. Now, I know everyone says America is a melting pot, which it is. Like, don't get me wrong, it is 100% a melting pot. But nowadays, that melting pot has really just become Americans. It's not a melting pot anymore. Those are Americans. We come in every shape, color, form, speak hundreds of different languages. That is just America now. There is no one real stereotype to America. Now, Australia, obviously, you're thinking of, oh, a dingo ate my baby and crikey, the fucking alligator hunter guy. But for the most part, Australians really only make up, I would probably guess, like, obviously, I'm probably exaggerating, but about 50%. As far as the people that I met there, it was about 50% actual native Australians, like people that was parents were from Australia. A lot of them were actually Americans, Canadians. I met a lot of Europeans. I met a lot of Koreans, a lot of Chinese, a lot of Taiwanese people, a lot of people from the Philippines, a lot of New Zealanders. I mean, it really is a true melting pot. So that did make it so that I wasn't so singled out in every situation, because there was a lot of people from a lot of different places, although most of the time I was the only American. So today's story kind of takes place during a time in my past where I was hanging out with a lot of Korean kids. Obviously, like I was saying, I really hung out with a lot of Asians when I was in Australia towards the end of my visit in Australia. And really, it had a lot to do with me being really good friends with this guy named Woo Sung, who was a Korean kid that me and my Canadian friend John used to hang out with. Now, John eventually went back to Canada, so it was really just me and Woo Sung hanging out, and he got kind of mixed up with the wrong crowd. He eventually joined a gang called Tsinghua. Now, I know what you're thinking, oh, gang, a bunch of criminal activities. Mind you, we were like 15 at the time, so there was no real criminal activity going on. We never did anything illegal. The only thing we really did was just fight like over territory. And what do I mean by territory? Well, so begins my nerdy life. So pretty much how this all started is I used to go hang out at internet cafes way back in the day with my friend Woo Sung to play StarCraft and the original Counter-Strike. So back then, something that was really popular to do in my area in Australia was that everyone would go to an internet cafe, buy a whole bunch of time there, and we would all game together on LAN. And we would just play StarCraft, like StarCraft 1. So anyways, we used to go to this like mall type area, I guess. It was like a bunch of connecting malls. It was like a shopping little corner of Australia called Chatswood. And Chatswood was completely overrun with Asian gangs. So if you wanted to go hang out at one of these internet cafes, I mean, you either had to have friends that was in this gang, or you just had to be cool with them. Mind you, again, this is just a bunch of kids. So it's not as hardcore as you guys are probably thinking, or at least I didn't see it that way. And we got in some fights, don't get me wrong, and we thought we were badasses, but we weren't dealing drugs, we weren't shooting and stabbing anybody, we weren't bribing cops, we weren't doing anything that you see on TV. So amongst our little group of friends who were in Tsinghua, and eventually I had joined as well. I actually joined under Woo Sung, so I was kind of like under him. He was like a level 4, I was like a level 5. Yeah, there was levels to this shit. So he was my Dai Lo, so it's like brother or something. It's like, I think that means big brother in Korean or something like that. So it was like a really structured thing, like a military. And one of the other like level 5s that was kind of like co-level 5s with me, who was also under Woo Sung, was this really stony Korean kid. Imagine a droopy-eyed Asian kid with like long hair that was like a bowl cut that came all the way down to his cheeks. Really funny dude, always wore really baggy clothing, was extremely friendly. Obviously, he was a drug dealer too, so he just sold like pot. It wasn't like huge drug dealer, like we weren't all involved, and he wasn't getting supplied by Tsinghua. He would literally buy pot for himself and then sell off little bits to his friends. Really stony kid, but eventually he got caught by, I guess, his like dorm mother, because he was one of those kids that had been sent over from Korea to attend school here in Australia while the father and mother still lived in Korea, I think. Well, anyways, he had gotten in trouble there and decided just to run away. And his girlfriend was harboring this guy. She wasn't doing it in the way you're thinking. Basically, she had left town and left the second bottom part of the house unlocked so he could stay there while they were out of town for like 2 weeks. Now, I don't know if you guys know, in like a lot of bigger cities, a lot of the houses will have like a separate sectioned off part of the house that can be rented out to help pay for the mortgage. So it's almost like a second little apartment either above the garage or below in the basement. There's just another sectioned off part of the house that has like a separate entrance. So she had left that part open, which is where I think her grandparents were actually living, because it was like all set up with old people shit. Well, of course, he decided to have us all over there because, you know, he wasn't just gonna go stay there by himself. So me and like 3 other Singhua dudes, some huge Lebanese guy who looked like he was 30, but it was actually 16. We actually like checked his driver's license, and we just didn't believe he was as young as he said he was, and he was actually 16. He just dressed like a full-on adult. Over there, you know, the drinking age is 18, so the kids are just generally much older than they are in America. A whole bunch more responsibility is placed on them at a younger age. So kids in Australia really start to dress like young professionals in their early 20s, where in America that usually doesn't happen until like after college, and usually it takes a kid a year after college to really develop a professional business dress sense. I'm guilty of this, trust me. But what really changes the tide of this story is a dragon head, which is a guy who's like an upper above. He was actually ahead of the guy that was ahead of Wu Sung. So he was like a dragon head, which was like a level 0 or whatever like that. So we were pretty much all in chats where we were all under a guy named John Smith. Now, of course, I don't really think that was his real name, but we just called him John. This is a different John from the one I mentioned earlier. He was actually a pretty cool dude, but like a vicious fighter. This dude could scrap like 10 people, and I've seen him do it. The dude was straight up nuts. He would just pop off. I couldn't tell you how absolutely crazy this guy was. But it was basically his boss was in town and had met up with a couple of my like Singhua friends like at an arcade or something like that, because we played a lot of video games back then, but we didn't play them at our houses because the consoles sucked. We went to arcades, we went to internet cafes, shit like that. Because back then a gaming computer was 1, non-existent, and 2, if you wanted to build one, it was just ridiculously expensive and no one had them shits. Well, anyways, this dragon head guy kind of came with us, and he was this tall, lanky dude with a pinky nail that was grown out. He wore glasses. They didn't have like prescription lenses or anything like that. This looked like a total fucking like wicked mobster, and he dressed like it. He was wearing like all white like pajamas shit. So it totally changed the whole tide of the whole evening. So we basically went back to the house. Dragon head dude started spitting off all this gang fucking propaganda, and we just listened to it the whole night and pretty much just chilled out. Nothing really happened that night besides a whole bunch of storytelling and talking about shit. We all pretty much just passed out. Like, so 7 kids just like totally sprawled out across the basement. Now, to compare the size, like if you've ever seen the basement here at the TKG Field House, it's like half the size of that. The real story starts the next morning. So we all wake up. Well, I think a bunch of us made like bowls of noodles because that's what we had brought to the house to eat. But when the dragon head guy, and I really just don't remember his name, that's why I'm calling him that. When he woke up, he decided that it was time for training, which basically meant that he would pick twos and we'd have to go spar, fight each other. Now, if you were to take a step away from this situation and kind of look at the group of people I was with, I'm obviously the only white kid, so I was half Asian, so I did identify with these guys a little bit, but everyone knows I look almost completely Caucasian. Unless you're another mix or you're Asian, you're probably not going to even recognize that I'm half Chinese. So I stood out a bit, especially to this dragon head guy, because he was full-blown fucking gang mentality, which, you know, at that point they really don't like white people. They really do not like Westerners. Like in the hardcore like Asian criminals, well, they really do not like Westerners. And this guy was not a fan of just about anything I said that whole night before. So he ended up matching me up with like the 2 bigger guys that were there, which ended up being that Lebanese dude that was like huge and fucking totally built, and this other really tall Asian guy that eventually showed up and had just in fact arm wrestled the Lebanese guy, and we really thought the Lebanese guy would win because he had like bigger arms, but the Chinese guy was just bigger and taller and just I guess bigger in mass. I actually think he was Korean, but anyways, he ended up beating him in the arm wrestling match and then got assigned to fight me, and I had to fight him first. I don't think he really wanted to fight me at the beginning because he was like, nah man, I'm not gonna go first, so he ended up pairing me up with the stony Asian kid, and we sat there, you know, we'd put our dukes up but encircled each other a couple of times, but he eventually said that he couldn't fight me, that we were good friends, and then the dragon head guy totally roasted that kid and got really fucking pissed because we wouldn't fight each other. So back came in the tall ass Korean guy, and he proceeded to absolutely kick the fuck out of me. I did not stand a chance. I'd like to say I got a couple good licks in, but I didn't. Nope, that was a one-sided bout. I do remember throwing like 1 punch to his side, like I hit him in the kidney. It barely tapped him. I know it probably tickled the dude. He did look down at me and say good hit, but then proceeded to jab me right in the chin and knock me the fuck out. So I totally got my ass beat by this guy. Just hands down, just beat the shit out of me. but not to the point where I was all bloodied up. I didn't get like jumped. I didn't get beat up, like beaten to a pulp, but he had hit me a few times. I had gone down probably 7 times. I only landed that one punch. I think like after the 7th time, he said that he was done, and he actually gave me props for like being brave, because I did not stand a chance. He was like 6'6". I was like 5'8" at the time, probably weighed 120 pounds. This guy easily weighed 200. Like there was just no way. And he was like a hardened criminal, and I was just, you know, basic pretender pretty much. They were just my friends, and they happened to be in Tsinghua, so I joined Tsinghua. But it wasn't over. I thought it was gonna be over after that. After that, the Lebanese guy actually tapped the dragon head on like the shoulder and said, "I'm next," and went up to spar against me. And I really think that was a pussy ass move by him now that I'm looking back on it, because everyone had to fight eventually, and this guy basically volunteered to fight the guy that just got his ass beat, which to me is a pussy ass move. But this fight didn't end up being actual blows to the face. The previous fight, he had hit me like 4 or 5 times in the faces. I didn't lose consciousness ever. I'd say knocked out because he knocked me to the ground, but I never lost consciousness, but he did ring the shit out of me a few times. But this Lebanese guy, all he did was fucking knee the fuck out of me in my thigh. He was basically trying to make it where I couldn't walk. He was like fucking like, I don't even know what the hell, like Brazilian boxing my shit or something. He would just charge up to me and knee the fuck out of me, and because he wasn't throwing punches at my face, I was afraid to hit him in the face for fear of getting punched back in the face, because this dude was huge. At this point, I was actually afraid I might actually get hurt. I'm a pretty tough kid. I have a pretty like high tolerance for pain. I know that just from sports, not just from fighting. But you're not made out of glass if you've never been in a fight before. You can take a walloping. You really can, and you can keep going, because your body gives you adrenaline and numbs the pain, and you really just lose all memory of what's going on and just fucking start fighting. It's called a fight or flight response. And it's actually a really big rush you've never done. Now, I did like to fight. Now, I was in this gang, you know, we did get in a lot of fights, and I'm not going to pretend like I was some angel. You know, I was a scrappy kid. I enjoyed fighting. Back then, I was pretty good at fighting. For someone my size, I could hold my own, but not because I was a talented boxer or I knew fucking jujitsu or anything. I would just throw the first punch. And if you really want to know the secret to winning a fight, like truly winning the fight, having a massive advantage over whoever you're fighting, no matter how big they are, throw the first punch. But if you hit them first, it always rings them a little bit. And just because most people don't want to fight at their heart, most of them are all talk, and if you surprise them once with that good first punch, and they haven't been in a bunch of fights and know they're not made out of glass, you can usually beat the shit out of them just mentally. The physical part's just what manifests. Anyways, this guy proceeded to just knee the shit out of me to the point where I almost couldn't walk, and he eventually backed off. So at this point, I actually left. Pretty much I just kind of like limped out of there and went to go take a bus home. And I do remember getting text messages from the stony Asian kid and a couple other kids just wondering if I was okay, because they thought I like died and had to go to the hospital, because I really got the shit beat out of me. It did look pretty violent, probably from a third person's point of view. But no, really, I just limped home and went home. I didn't have any broken bones. I mean, I didn't even really have any black eyes. My thighs were like black from all the bruises, and I had a couple good nicks on my face, but I don't actually bruise that much. Again, I know this from sports. And I guess from this situation. I don't always say that because my parents really never noticed. I think sometimes they noticed I had like bloody knuckles or I was a little bruised. I guess they always assumed it was from sports because they played rugby over there. And if you've ever seen rugby, well, you get fucked up. But I later found out that they had gone into the house to get food and to play StarCraft and to just generally snoop around and just be hooligans because they had found a key in the grandma's basement. I'm sure the dragon head went up there to go steal shit or just to kind of like case the place out. They really didn't think anyone was going to come there because the guy's girlfriend had just left and she wasn't supposed to be back, I think, for like a month. It was a long time. So of course when they broke into the house, they set off a silent alarm, and apparently all the cops came and swarmed the house because I think the first unit got there and saw a bunch of what they described as Asian gangsters break into the house, so we called for backup. So there was this big ordeal. I think 2 of them ended up going to jail for like a year for breaking and entering, and of course they had pot on them and all these drug stuff. The stony kid got away. I think he had left shortly after me. I think he was actually tripped out by the situation as well. This dude was not a violent guy. He was a fun-loving dude, was always smiling, so I don't think he was all about the whole gang training thing either. And why I say I got so close to this happening to me is apparently this happened literally 10 minutes after I left. So much so that the dragon head thought I had called the police on them. And it was this big thing. I actually didn't go to Chatswood for like 2 weeks because it was like a hit out on me that this guy's crew that was from like a different part of Sydney. I forget what part of Sydney his like group was from, but he had his own territory that he ran because he was a dragon head, obviously. And they had come down to Chatswood and were basically hanging around there waiting for me to come back to screw me up. But word had eventually gotten to them that they had set the silent alarm when they broke into the house, and it had basically come out that I didn't have anything to do with it. And I returned to chats would hang out with my Singhua friends, and I never heard about it again. Save the part where the guys were in chats with looking for me, trying to fucking come get me because they thought I snitched. Which, had I been them, I probably would have thought the same thing. The timing was almost too perfect. But why do I say almost got deported? Basically, when I was living in Australia, I wasn't a citizen of Australia. I was there under what's called like an expatriate visa, which means my dad was there to work and had a visa there to work, and I was there because I was under 18. When you're a foreigner in a country under that kind of visa and you get arrested, you get deported. Now imagine my family. Had I gotten that trouble, I wouldn't have just been deported. My whole family would have been deported. My dad would have been disgraced at his company. My life would have been fucking over. This could have been a huge ordeal. And I knew this pretty much the whole time, and I'll tell you guys some stories in the future about me getting caught doing graffiti and stuff like that, and you'll kind of wonder why I was such a dumbass. But like I said in the very beginning of this video, I hope you guys don't judge me too much. It really was just me trying to fall in with a crowd that was also kind of like outsiders in Australia. Not that I didn't get along with the Australians. I was just good friends with Wusung and liked playing StarCraft in internet cafes. But yep, that was another time I barely escaped total utter ruin. I hope you guys are enjoying these videos. See you tomorrow.